Didn't.
To have another.
Yeah.
It's a long meeting.
Yes. Okay. Okay. We will ask for a second. Okay.
Let's handcuff to you. Yeah, it's okay.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, I don't have anything.
Oh, you don't
Drop me, huh?
drop you entirely? You don't even want to like speak extemporaneously?
No,
Oh, okay. All right.
sorry, it didn't work out tonight.
Well, I'm sorry, we'll miss your input. Why? That's a strange one. Why is that?
So do you have all those slides that you want to present?
Yeah. Tim's has a strange symbol beside it. Do you have any idea what that means?
Nope.
Okay.
That's just the file name problem.
Alrighty.
So while ready?
No, we're not seeing. I'm not seeing anything. I'm connected to power, which usually is the problem.
Power on.
Okay, well, that explains that.
There you go. It's working.
Yay, okay. And we have an AED. Alrighty. This is the Sidr working group. If you didn't mean to be attending Sidr, if you meant to attend something else, you are welcome to depart. If you want to sit in the back and do your email, that's fine also. Here is the note well that must be displayed at every single meeting, and you've seen the same stuff, I'm sure, many times. It means that whatever you say, write in an email, imply by your body motions, anything can be used against you. You really must take care the mics are live and archived. They tried to make it simpler by creating a summarized version and didn't seem to be able to get that one to work. So this one isn't the official one. And then there was even another one. Notice that they've added to the number of RFCs that you really ought to be aware of. Here are the resources that you have available to you for minutes and the draft lists and the tools site and the audio and the Jabber and the Medico and all those different ways of talking to each other. Okay, so blue sheets are all already on their way around. We have one volunteer for minutes taker, but it's a long meeting and it would be really good if we could have a second volunteer, please. Please, a second volunteer to help with taking the minutes. Notice that on one of the previous slides talked about the Etherpad. It's a wonderful way to have a collaborative notes taking. Please, another one, please. Please, 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 pretty please with sugar on top. Okay, John volunteered. John has volunteered many times. It really ought to be someone else. Is there anybody else that would like to participate for the first time by trying to take minutes? All right, John's is one volunteer, Sriwam is another, and Wes Hardiker volunteered to be Jabber Scribe. Working group status. We have the adverse actions, which was adopted and went to working group last call in one meeting cycle. I think that's a record. The working group last call started some really energetic conversations, so I'm not certain that we're done with that one yet. AS migration went through working group last call, IETF last call, and got to the ISG, and they said, we can't analyze this until we see the BGPSec protocol itself. So it's waiting for the BGPSec protocol to get to the ISG. ALGS is out of the working group, publication requested on Alvaro's list of things that he must review. He says it's measured in the dozens, so have sympathy. Ops also publication requested. BGPSec overview has a new version addressing working group last call comments, waiting for those people who did comment to say that their comments have been adequately addressed. If we don't hear from them soon, the chairs will decide whether or not they've been addressed. PKI profiles also publication requested, and the protocol document is publication requested. Protocol, PKI profiles, and ALGS will form a set going forward. They all refer to each other. Rollover draft has been waiting for other things to kind of settle down, and heard from the authors and a little bit of a conversation about if that needs some attention now. Delta protocol got a new version. Validation signaling is in publication requested. The use cases got a new version. No substantive changes in that one in a long time. Publication protocol is kind of tied to the Delta protocol, so it's active. It hasn't seen changes since the last meeting. 6485 BIS is in the RFC editor queue. It's actually in auth 48, and there was a conversation with the RFC editor. They promised me a suggestion of how to deal with one of their comments. Any place where the original document said this document, they don't like that because now it's not that document, it's something else. Yeah. Out-of-band setup also just finished working group last call. No substantive comments on that one. Tree validation got a new version. RFC 6810, that's the RPKI router protocol, is dealing with the routing AD comments. Validation reconsidered, we'll hear more about today. RPSL SIG actually got into and out of the ISG in one time through. So we have an RFC published. I don't think the authors are here, Robert or Brian. Oh, so no one to applaud. Router keying got a new version, and Slurm did also, but no real substantive changes. And the multiple publication points has been expired for a while. Haven't yet declared it dead, so have to figure out with the authors and the working group whether we need to continue with that work. So summary, we have 27 RFCs now, one just trembling on the edge, one in ISG processing, that's the one that's waiting for the protocol document. 5 in publication requested status, three, if you include the one that's in dealing with the routing AD comments, are past working group last call. So that makes 8 that are out of the working group. 1 expired and we actually added 1 to the list, and that's the route server work that we had presented last time. So today, we're going to have 2 talks about existing drafts and then a whole bunch of stuff about things that aren't existing drafts but really ought to be very interesting. So Tim is going to be standing for a while. Where's Tim? There you are.
So remote, or should I just scroll through the slide? I don't see your remote actually. Oh, here it is. But it means the thing needs to come in. Just this slide. Okay.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Whilst we're looking into remotes, yeah, I'm not sure. I can also call next slide. It's okay.
Okay.
Just next slide, please. For those who followed, there was a bit of discussion recently on HTTPS and the RDP protocol. In this slide deck, I'm not going to talk about the whole concept behind it because that has been discussed here a few times. So if people have questions, then you're welcome, but I'm going to assume that that is understood. So let me go straight to the point. There was discussion about, well, if we use HTTPS, should we care about the service certificate, checking the service certificate that is used for the HTTPS connection? And there are 2 things here. In RDP, we connect to a server to get a notification file that tells us that new stuff is available. And then we get either snapshots or delta files that contain RPKI objects. The RPKI objects themselves are protected by crypto, so we can always validate them. So even if we get them through a untrusted channel, we can validate and use this stuff. However, if somebody is able to withhold information from a lying party, give back, in this case, all notification files, for example, then a relying party may not find out that there is something new available. So at the end of the day, I could go to the next slide, please. This is a lot of text. I sent this to the list as well, but essentially it says, it presents a compromise. Let's try to validate the HTTPS connection, because if there's something wrong, that's probably something somebody ought to look into. But more often than we'd like to think, problems like that are actually due to misconfigurations, etc. So we don't want to reject the connection completely and stop here. We still want to try and retrieve whatever we can get so we can proceed with validation, because, as I said earlier, that's all protected by crypto and we can check it. If there is a problem, though, a good warning should trigger that people figure out, okay, do I explicitly want to trust this certificate? Or is there a real problem here that needs to be investigated and resolved? All that said, in no circumstances could this lead to an attacker validly signing RPKI objects for CAs. So in our minds, this presents the best approach to signal potential problems whilst avoiding overreacting and possibly not getting useful information about RPKI objects. So that was actually all I had on this, but I have one more slide because it is pending. I believe, Rob can speak up if he disagrees, obviously, but I think in the author's minds, this HTTPS approach can work. We haven't actually implemented the code just yet, but Rob said that he had something working, right? And well, basically we believe it works. One last thing we may still want to do in this version of, well, in the next version of the document is update the trust anchor locator document to allow for a HTTPS URIs as well. It's not essential, we can also tackle it later, dependent on the feedback from this group, I suppose. But other than that, I think we're pretty close to done as far as we can see. So.
Rob Ostine, DRL, just to follow up on what Tim was saying. We have two interoperable implementations, Ripes and Mine. Mine implements HTTPS in the TAL. It actually does the syntax that was proposed in the multi-URI TAL draft that's now expired. And when we were talking about this, what Tim was going to say to the working group this week, we said, gee, it would be nice if we'd actually implemented the checking the certificate in HTTPS, but surviving anyway. And I told Tim it was going to be 6 lines of code. I lied. It turned out it was actually 16 lines of code, and it took an hour, not 20 minutes, because I had to dig the exception it was going to throw out of the guts of the Python implementation. But it's trivial. It turns out that the API that that's usually presented for SSL, you actually just have to try it twice. You try it with validation turned on, that fails. You try it again with it turned off. So you just log an error when that happens.
Yes, and on that, I mean, our implementation is Java-based, and by default, Java really doesn't like you to, yeah. Well, long story short, there is a way to do it, but we haven't actually done it. It's ugly, it's a hack, but it can be done. So we have confidence that we can do the same, that we can verify the certificate. If it fails, give a warning, and then fall back to essentially a accept everything strategy. So. Yeah, that's it as far as I'm concerned on this one. I just wanted to say, if people have comments, please let us know now or whenever, because otherwise I think we want to go for last call pretty soon on this. The main open question I have, but maybe that's more for the authors, if people here don't mind, is whether to include an update to the Trust Anchor Locator document right here as well. The benefit would be that it opens up a path to later phase out rsync without a need to update this again. So it might be useful, but it's not a critical thing. Maybe you can have a quick chat later to see what the best strategy is. Okay, with that, I'm done.
No other comments? Going once, twice? Okay, done.
Okay. Yes, another one. Next slide, please. So, 2 new versions have been made of this one recently. I'll be talking mostly about the latest. So, first of all, thank you, Steve Kent, for reviewing. That was very helpful. A major change in this version is that we now don't just update a specific bit of RFC. Let me glance to get it right. Yes, 6487. But we update the complete section 7.2 about how path validation works to have it, essentially just have it in one place so it's easier to read. We also made it more explicit what we mean by this verified resource set. And divided in a pile of either IP or AS resources that are verified. And in an earlier version, I thought that there would be a possible shortcut when it comes to, well, the next slides, not just that, but regarding ROA validation, etc., that, you know, we could have a different way of evaluating EE certificates. But after discussion, I think, well, I can't call this a consensus, but at least I agree with everybody else was opposing essentially, that yes, it's better to just keep it consistent and have exactly the same behavior for CA and EE certificates. And what evaluation makes sense regarding the VRS, IP, or AS can be dealt with in the appropriate objects. So, yes, next slide. What this document also needs to update, oh, and I forgot to mention that actually, but an earlier version of this document was informational. This one is now standard and attempts to update existing RFCs. It also needs a couple of headers still, but that's, yeah, basically, we can work on that. That's minor details. But okay, when it comes to ROA validity, essentially, well, where the ROA specification currently says that a ROA must have all of its prefixes on the EE certificate, we now say, well, these resources must be on the verified resource set IP of that EE certificate. So no major change there, but it just makes it more clear that this algorithm was supposed to be used. Another thing is a recommendation to CAs that if they wish to avoid, let's say, fate sharing, that they can opt to issue different ROAs for different prefixes. You don't have to put all your prefixes for the same ASN on a single ROA. And if you don't, and one of the prefixes is no longer available in the chain, then the remaining ROAs just remain valid. If you put them all on one ROA, then a ROA would be invalidated. So at least speaking for our implementation, it would be a fairly trivial change for our hosted service, at least, to issue separate ROAs instead. It could lead to more ROAs in the system, but we don't believe that it will introduce scaling problems that are that we can't deal with. So next slide, please. Yeah. So this is well, authors have responded to this as well. We also ought to consider what to do with BGP-SEC router certificates. Because they can contain multiple ASNs. So essentially, we believe they should also be considering the VRS, Verified Resource Set AS. And we may want to recommend that people issue different certificates for different ASNs. So as to avoid that if one ASN is no longer valid in the chain, the whole certificate is invalidated. I believe, but yeah, I'm not familiar with all the technicalities, but I believe that both Sean and Steve indicated that they believe they can update the text and that it addresses the problem. As far as I can see, it looks good to me, but yeah, that's a question going forward if that is. Then, last slide finally, because this was brought up this week, again, I have to say. Rob sent a message to the list regarding this that I'd forgotten about this, but well, bottom line is if we leave the behavior to the relying parties to choose whether to use the traditional validation algorithm or the reconsidered, this can lead to situations where different relying parties have different results when they look at the RPKI. It can also lead to the fact that a CA who publishes RPKI objects cannot be sure as to what algorithm is used by people validating. So it was suggested that we should have what's the word I'm looking for? We should have a specific object identifier to indicate that this new validation algorithm is supposed to be used. If that's introduced, that will actually break current relying party implementations. So a timeline should probably include a phase where, first of all, relying parties are updated so that they can understand the new OIDs and implement the new algorithm. Then sometime later, CAs may start to use this when they publish, because if they do it too soon, that would break relying parties. And then at some point, they also want closure and say, no, okay, now CAs must use this new OID, so that the old validation algorithm for RPKI is completely replaced effectively. I think, Rob, it's better if you comment on this yourself, but I believe that the intent was actually to break relying parties in the process. That was intended as a feature to ensure that people update and we have consistent behavior in the end, right? But there's a timeline so that anybody who takes care of their setup has plenty of time to update their relying party software, and essentially for them it would never break. But Rob, maybe you want to comment more.
Rob Ostine, Dragon Research. Yeah, there are two major issues here. One is just, this is a protocol change. It is not a 100% compatible protocol change. It is a protocol change. And I'm just trying to force it to be explicit. Okay, rather than just, magic voodoo happens. It's like, okay, look, it's a protocol change. We're deploying a protocol change. We just stage it out like any other protocol change, mark it, move on. The other thing, I mentioned this in the mail that I sent to the list, but for people who missed it, there's a very specific problem, at least with OpenSSL. OpenSSL has been shipping for 10 years with an implementation of the old validation algorithm in the OpenSSL libraries, not just the RP code, in the libraries. That ship sailed a decade ago. It's too late to pull it back, sorry. So what I want to do is make sure that once we've changed the semantics, we don't trip over the old library code. Because we can't just change, if we're going to wait for the OpenSSL library to change for something, that's not going to happen, not in any useful time frame. So just move aside, new object identifier, the code in OpenSSL becomes irrelevant because it doesn't match the object identifier anymore, and we're fine. Otherwise, we have this lurking time bomb, which is just a real mess. I don't want to deal with it.
Well, on this, I will probably need some help, and I tried asking this a few times. To identify where exactly which object identifier needs to be updated and where all the references are that need to be chased. So that's a bit of extra work. And I would appreciate help, because with the general principle, I don't have a problem. But yes, some help there would be really appreciated. I can also, I can create a new version of the document that includes something, but especially on that point, I'd like some help. Obviously, that text hasn't been written yet, but I think it's important that here we get a sense of that the working group actually agrees with the general approach. Obviously, this is not where consensus is called, but it would help me to get some feeling of that. So if you have problems with this, then I would say please let us know. Otherwise, I'm going to continue in this direction.
In previous cases, when we had any statement that had OID in the statement anywhere, everyone turned to Russ and he said, I'll write, I'll get you one real soon now. I have to find out if he's still the person.
This is Russ. Russ gave up that job. That OID ARC has been turned over to IANA. You put a TBD in the doc. You can get an early allocation if there's a desire to do so. Once you have a stable doc, you ask your area director to get the early allocation, and that happens, goes to IANA. IANA then turns to the expert review for that registry. That's where I'm still involved.
Okay. No, that part I knew actually, but we have a lot of documents in this working group that have references to 3779, and we may have to look at all of those references and figure out if they're still valid or need to be updated. So that's potentially a lot of work. But it's not saying that it can't be done, but it's a lot of things to look at, and I think people should look carefully that it's done properly, and help is appreciated.
Okay.
So the OID we're talking about is in 3779, using the IDPE IP adder blocks. Oh yes, and then another one for autonomous system numbers.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Doug Montgomery. So with the last part of your arc here, it would seem useful to get, I assume, the other four RIRs to comment on their comfort on that. Given that you're standing there, I assume that one of them is comfortable with that.
No, I actually didn't. This is just an indication, and it can be part of the discussion phase. I think it's more, the important thing that I try to convey here is the idea of a timeline and closure on it. So whether 6 months or 12 months or whatever is appropriate, I don't mind too much. But I think it would be a good thing to have, in the final document, have a specific time.
Right. And just getting comment from the other RIRs or all five.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Andy Newton, so just to address that comment, we are all the RIRs are talking with each other about this, and we're all aware of it.
Rob Osstein, TRL again.
Yes, and support.
Yeah, just so that people understand how much work we're talking in the relative phases here. The CA side of this is a trivial change. It's literally just you were using this OID, you changed that OID. You could, if you were brave, you could actually write it in as soon as this timeline becomes official. You could write a piece of code that says after this date, flip, and just walk away. Probably people won't do it that way, but you could. There's no other behavioral change. Right, correct. The only real work here is on the RP side. And the document changes. Sorry, Tim.
There is that, and there is the potential of delegated CAs that if the parent uses new, but the child doesn't yet, or the other way around, you get a mix. That's okay, I guess. We can implement it. That's more for relying party software to deal with. That they evaluate which flavor to use, not for the whole TA, but on each level. But I believe it can be done. So.
I actually, Sandy Murphy Parsons, that was one of the points I was going to make. Are we going to need to keep the trees distinct? They're going to have, or can we mix them? PKIs, there's issues there. So in terms of algorithm transition, about whether the parent can produce this, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
So yes, I agree that's something that has to be considered. I like the fact that you changed your thinking about the EE certificates, because it suddenly, the whole validation reconsidered was preventing operational problems, and we seem to have reintroduced it. Golly, there was something else, and now I forget.
Chris?
Well, Rüdiger Volk, Deutsche Telekom. Just a little bit of nitpicking. Do not say ensure that all RPs behave the same when you mean that they use the same algorithm.
Okay, understood. But yes, that's what I meant.
One last thing, Rob Osstein again. Just to Sandy's point, I cannot claim to have thought about the trickle down consistency thing in great detail, but I think it works if you just for each object obey the rules for the OIDs in that object when you're in the mixed state. You may not get the results anybody intended, but you get a consistent set of results, which is really all you can ask for in a transition state.
I'm going to do it from here because my laptop gets lonely and then we don't have slides. Sandy Murphy Parsons, I do understand that. One of the reasons for the OID, though, is to make the difference in semantics clear so people know what it is that the objects are actually saying. So having a mix in the tree sounds, I'd have to think about whether the semantics of validation reconsidered is a subset, explicit subset of the semantics of the other. Issue to be resolved. That there was another comment about issuing separate ROAs, separate EE certificates for distinct prefixes. I understand that that's easy to do if you have 12/8 and 100/16 in the same certificate. It's easy to separate those. But in cases where the change is you have a /16 and you're giving up a /18 out of that, you can't produce all those distinct certificates. So
No,
you're going to
correct.
have to do something else.
Yeah, correct. But to be honest, I think it's already best practice to issue ROAS for the announcements that you're actually doing. And if you transfer space out, I think you should update that regardless.
Right.
So technically you're correct, but I don't think it's a huge issue. And I think there's still benefit in separating out the completely different prefixes that are not adjacent, let's say.
Sandy Murphy Parsons. I know that Aaron, their interface, you have your org ID and all the resources for the org ID, and you click on generate certificates for this, and it certifies all those resources at the same time. I don't know if that means that there's a problem for them to try to separate out the different things. The point being, I'm not asking for them to say anything about it. The point being that different RIRs, interfaces, and architectures might make this differ in complexity for what it is that they're required to do.
Well, yes. So correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, but in case of Aaron, the actual ROA is really specified by the user of their hosted system. So the actual ROA object.
That's true.
In our case, people configure which announcements they want to authorize, and we automatically create a ROA. So we can, in our case, it's trivial for us to generate different ROAs instead. In Aaron's case, well, there's no immediate need for people to do this, but anybody using that system could create different ROAs for different prefixes, right? So all I'm saying here is we could have a recommendation to people saying like, okay, maybe not even a recommend, but a may, that, okay, you can think about this. If you find it convenient to have everything together, you can do it, but that has this risk. You may want to separate.
Right.
That's really all we're saying in the document at this time.
Okay. And one final comment, I did agree with your statement about you may need to, there's a possibility that more updates need to be added to the header because we seem to be having disputes about how many things this document will have to update. Okay. Any further comments?
This is from Sean Turner. Since BGBSec PKI profiles is through working group last call, the authors are looking to be directed as to whether to incorporate the changes inspired by RPKI considered.
Yeah. I addressed this question to our routing AD. Did he want, if the changes were clarifications and not changes in substance, then he wants the changes to be introduced now. It's perfect time to do that. So none of the changes that I saw were anything that wasn't already possible and implied. It just added, made it explicit. So I think we're okay.
Right. And if not, then we can always add an updates here, but then we're dependent, I guess, on that document making it to RFC status, or I don't know, maybe
Right.
the RFC editor is good enough. I don't know, but it would be good to know then, because otherwise we might be stuck here waiting.
Yeah. We do end up with dependency graph problems, yes.
Yes.
I see someone at the mic.
Randy Bush, Dragon Research. I thought we had agreed that this document will just have in its headers updates, modifies, blah, 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 whatever.
Didn't hear. Sorry, I couldn't.
You're gonna have to speak up, speak a little bit more into the mic, please.
I thought, Randy Bush, Dragon Research, I thought we had agreed that this document will just have in its boilerplate header what documents it modifies and updates.
Mhm.
That was a
Yes.
binary question.
That
Yes.
was the intent.
So
The-
why are we going down this rat hole?
Because there was a suggestion that we wanted to avoid the inclusion of anything in the PKI profiles that made PKI profiles rely normatively on this document. We want to avoid that, right? We were talking about the suggested changes being made to PKI profiles. Okay.
Well,
Shake of head. Okay.
okay, question to chairs then. Is it a strategy to not to revert that dependency? Let this document update the profile document that is now in the queue as soon as it's published. Well, we have a real RFC to point to rather than something that is in
Right.
progress. And when this is finished, it just updates it, just like all the other things. So if that makes the process easier, I think it's something we can do. But yeah, again, it's not really my specialty, but it
Yeah.
seems like a strategy to me.
I think that's something I'd prefer to see if our routing AD would support that sort of thing. But we will cross that bridge if and when we come to it. Right
Okay.
now, we're not in that state.
Hi, Alberto Thunder, Routing AD. Whatever you want. From the cost point of view, it's the same. If you refer to it and update later, the only thing that's going to happen, of course, is that that other one is probably going to be published before, but you don't have to wait for an RFC number to put in the header that this is going to update that. It's just going to be weird because the other one hasn't been published.
Yeah.
But whatever you want to do works for the process.
Okay.
It's up to you.
Good.
Good to know.
Okay. On to the next.
Yep.
I see no one else at the mic. Okay.
All right, last one, I promise. Yes, so I've done some statistics on RPKI actually that I thought were interesting to share with the group. So here it is. Next slide, please. Existing dashboards out there, I think a lot of them, well, at least a few of them, look at adoption, global adoption of RPKI, and they say this RAR has this much and this RAR has that much and whatever. But I think there are a couple of issues with that. Because first of all, the RARs are not the ones issuing the ROAs themselves. I mean, that's the members of the RARs. And second, there are big differences, local differences actually, that I will see on the next slide. That I think if you look at global uptake, that gets hidden, and it may give an indication of usefulness that, in some countries or regions, it may actually be much more usable than in others. So next slide, please. The method that I've used is we have root collectors that we manage with RIPE and CC, where we get routing tables from across the globe. We combine them, we aggregate them, and I use that as an entry point. So I look at all the announcements that we know of. I compare this to the RAR statistics that are published on the NRO website. where the RARs say, okay, this resource is used or allocated or assigned to this country, it may not be 100% accurate, or like, I don't know how many nines are there, but largely it's usable. And well, I essentially use this to make a breakdown of announcements to countries, and then I compare this to the ROAS. I've only done IPv4 for now. Well, time is one issue, but the other issue is that with IPv6, I'm not sure that stats like the amount of announcements that you see, or the amount of individual addresses you see in announcements make much sense, because the space is so huge. And well, in any case, that's why I'm focusing on IPv4 now. Next slide, please. So if we look at the fraction of IPv4 prefixes announced in a country that are actually covered by ROAS, we see big differences. We see we see uptake in South America. We see, well, Greenland is very green here, but obviously in terms of the internet, Greenland is probably not a very big country. We also see things in Europe, but big differences. For example, Spain, not much, but France, quite a bit. And if we look at the next slide, if we look at IP addresses, the number, that's a different way of looking at the same problem, I suppose. We get even different things. So, for example, for France, the prefixes are, I believe, in the range of 30%, whereas the IPv4 addresses covered is something like 65%. So that indicates that there we have, well, next slide, please. We see that in France, I believe there are a couple of big players that have a lot of space and are using this. And there may well be a lot of, for example, provider independent holders in France that are not using this. So relatively small announcements that are not using ROAS at the moment. Next slide, please. I also wanted to look at, okay, announcements that are considered valid if you look at ROAS versus anything that is covered. So countries that show up here have at least some coverage. See big differences again. This is when you just look at the number of announcements. Next slide, please. But if you look at the space involved, you get a slightly different picture. In general, it looks much better, actually. Yeah, Chile is quite red here, but that's because the scale also starts higher in this case. One thing that you might have noticed was Mexico there. So there it seems that there are a lot of invalid small announcements. But if you look at the actual space, that kind of disappears. Next slide, please. So, yeah, to reiterate that, I think if you look at this in terms of actual address space, the fraction of what is valid versus the total covered is much higher. There are some logical reasons for this. Often you find that invalid announcements are actually more specific announcements, so they would be smaller. But we also find that often invalid announcements are actually covered by something that is valid. And I think that's another thing that we see here. So, yes, and finally, we also tend to see, and I have a next slide on that. Yeah, that I try to see, if, you know, in general, do we see any relation between the adoption and the fraction that is valid? I don't think there's a very strong correlation, but by and large, it's high. There are a few, the fraction valid is high. There are a few cases here between, let's say, 10 and 50% uptake where we see fairly significant uptake, but not a high fraction of valid announcements. It would be useful to look at that individually. My guess is that quite a few of these are actually places where the total coverage, the amount of announcements done in that country might be low. So anything, going right or wrong can, push the numbers in a direction. Next slide, please. Yeah. So really, I'm just doing this to provide people with some additional information. We can host this on our website. I think further analysis of, why are things right or wrong, it's not really something that I want to be involved in personally too much, but I think it's very useful research. If people find this interesting, well, we can have it on our website. You can talk to me if you want to look at the source, or if you want to have this data on some CSV format or whatever, we can look at that. And hope it's useful for somebody.
Any comments? Okay, so I'm sorry, but Sandy Murphy Parsons, I do have one question. If the person driving the chair, the slides could please go back. It's the slide that said something about provider independent. Whoops. There. Thank you. I'm sorry not to understand, what does the fact that address space is provider independent have to do with the number of announcements?
No, the space and announcements.
The space in the announcements. Okay.
So provider independent may be right to speak, I'm not sure. It's essentially where organizations have resources, but they are not a direct member of us.
Mm-hmm.
We have some contact with them, but because they're not our members, we have less contact with them. So that's one reason why they might use this less. They also, a lot of them tend to be organizations like, I don't know, banks or hospitals or, whatever, whose primary thing is not working with this. But finally, it also tends to be smaller prefixes.
Okay.
Rüdiger for Deutsche Telekom. Well, okay, as the name says, the opposite of PI is provider aggregated. Well, okay, provider connected. So to a very large extent, PI, at least in the Europe region, means more or less end users, which happen to usually have only small blocks. And the effort and expertise in doing stuff like this probably can be a little bit lower than the large parties that kind of do it as their business.
Okay, thank you.
And there is actually one aspect that I'm also seeing, kind of for the PA, the authorization mechanism for actually getting at that doesn't influence this here, but nevertheless, let me remark that kind of the authorization scheme that essentially goes into what is the non-RPKI authorization for doing certificates is kind of a little bit more interesting for the PI. And interesting here means, it's not that obvious, and maybe the trustworthiness is somewhat different.
Well, because these people are not our direct members, they don't have a normal access to our LAR portal, as we call it. They can get access essentially through the maintainer object that they have in the right database. But it's somewhat involved to set this up. In particular, they need to use a wizard that we have where they can say, associate my single sign-on account with this maintainer, and from that point on, they can certify their resources, provided that they've gone through a process with us that is, we started a few years ago, where we looked in more detail at these provider independent resources, and we wanted to make sure that all the documentation that we have about who holds it is up to date. And in some cases it isn't, and then they need to engage with us in the process to clear that up. And once that's done, they can have it. So yes, long story, but in short, it can be more involved for people. It is possible, but I think there's less, it takes more effort, and people are not necessarily as aware as the big players.
So so that explains why there's a relationship between coverage and space being higher than coverage and announcements. Thank you.
Hi, Taiji from JPNIC. Taiji from JPNIC. We have the similar situation in Japan. I think we have 2,000 address holders for historical PI space. They have address space and they can access to a web portal, but they don't know which AS is the original AS. So it's kind of a hard part to deploy them.
Okay. Done? Okay. I think you're done. I think you're off the stage now. Okay. So next we have Yufu. Okay.
Morning, everyone. I'm Yu from Cynic. This draft is to describe a problem when we have some test in our RPK test batch. It's for the ROA mergence. Next slide, please. As we all know that the ROA is a digital sign object that can provide a means of some objects for the back block holder has authorized an announcement system as AS to originate the rules of the IP prefix within address holders, address blocks, and okay, thank you. So for the ROAs the content of an ROA, you can see that is an ROA identifier and a single AS that has been authorized by the address space holder to originate the rules and a list of one or more IP address prefix that will be advertised. So if the address space holder needs to authorize multiple ASs to advertise the same set of address prefix, the holder insures multiple ROAs, one per AS number. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. So as described above, for the address space holder have a free choice to put multiple IP prefix into a single ROA, or they may separate it into each ROA. So what is the ROA mergence? It's a common case that each ROA contains exactly one AS number, but may put multiple IP address prefix in the operational process of the ROA issue and issuance. So next slide, please. So we have some tests in our RPK test bed. For the analysis, we have test anchor files and for the 5 RIRs, and we have downloaded these files to connect and analyze the all ROA objects. So by the April of this year, the total number of ROA objects issued around the world, I mean in the 5 RNR, is about 5,027. The number of ROAs of the rows containing only one prefix is about 2,341. And the number of rows containing 2 or more prefix is about 2,686. Next slide, please. So there are 20,379 IP address prefix in the 2,686 row objects, and average number of the prefix in the each row is 7.59. So we can see from this claim that almost is a trend that the IP address space holder want to issue ROAs with fewer IP prefix. You can see that more than 50% ROAs have fewer IP prefix. Next slide, please. So we also have some experimental analysis. You can see from this slide that one ISP is in the download where we issue 2 ROA. Why is the AS number is 64500, and the second row is the 64501. Next slide, please. So we do the experimental analysis that we do show the we do know the row request command, and we can see that 2 ROAs have issued as this 64500 and 64501. And then the ISPs have want to add another AS numbers to the ROA2. You can see that he added another IP prefix to the group 2. So he have showed the command again and issued 2 ROAs. You can see that the group 2 ROA2 is an prefix in this ROA. Next slide, please. So the ISP want to add another ROA for the group 1, but he made a mistake that the IP prefix for the is for the 204.0.113.128/28. So by this mistake, legitimate ROA object was revoked because this ISP's misconfiguration. So obviously, this misconfiguration may lead to some serious consequence. You can see that the ROA1 is revoked, and so the result may cause to some serious result to the RPKI, such as the BGP routes are classified as the invalid. Next slide, please. So we want to propose this problem and have discussions in the work group that the misconfiguration of rows containing multiple IP address prefix may lead to the much more serious consequence than rows with the fewer IP address prefix. The update of the row containing multiple IP address prefix will lead to redundant transmission between RP and BGP routers. So the frequent update to those roles will increase the convergence time of BGP routers and reduce their performance, obviously. So we have some considerations proposed in our draft. So to have discussions in the work group. Next slide, please. The first one is the insurance of the rows containing a large number of IP prefixes may lead to the misconfigurations more easily than the rows with the fewer IP prefix. And the second one is the number of rows containing multiple IP prefix should be limited, and the number of the IP prefix in each row should also be limited. And the third one is and safeguard scheme is essential to protect the process of the ROA insurance. That's the 3 suggestions and considerations for the ROA insurance. And thank you. Comments are appreciated.
Randy Bush, Dragon Research. First, thank you for teaching me a new English word, mergence. I didn't think it was one. I looked it up. It's a perfect word for this. 2 is you're completely correct. You're too polite. Would the CA authors please issue one ROA with only one prefix? Putting multiple in the same is saving RAM in 2016, and her examples are perfectly correct. Don't go there. Rob ran a script this morning. There are 27 ROAs in the global table from multiple RIRs that have over 100 prefixes in them.
Yes, Tim Ruijsels, Rob NCC. Well, we touched on this as well in the validation reconsidered, and yeah, thank you for looking at this. So we have a recommendation there already to do what you suggest. Mm-hmm. So that may cover what you want with this. I hope it does. The other thing is, but that's nitpicking maybe, but on one slide you mentioned that a announcement would be invalid if the ROA has multiple prefixes and one of them is no longer valid. But the ROA would become invalid, and typically, there are corner cases, but typically the announcement would then be considered not found. I do think it's important to make that distinction, because I don't want people to walk away here with thinking that this, I think it's a problem, and I think your solution is in the right direction, but I don't want to make the problem bigger than it is.
Okay, thank you.
Rüdiger Volk, Deutsche Telekom. As far as I know, actually, manufacturing ROAs is something that essentially no user of a CA actually does. What as far as I have seen it work in multiple implementations is the user of a CA, the holder of addresses, who is kind of actually doing the content of the ROAs, requesting ROAs, usually is working with a front-end system, and then the CA implementation actually manufactures the ROAs out of that. And if you are seeing something that looks weird, that goes to, say, Rob or to Tim and his colleagues, because they are actually bundling or not bundling, as far as I can understand. However, and so kind of, yes, there should be a few easy points in the system where one can make sure that you create large bundles of ROAs or small single ones. The interesting thing that I came about recently is that there is a surprising number of resource holders out there who are doing ROAs that say, well, okay, please do this ROA for my /16 in V4 and include all the more specifics down to 24. And then I'm seeing actually quite a long number, a long list of more specifics that are already covered by this, explicitly mentioned and configured, and not wanting to name the strange parties. Well, okay, if you just look into a current table and start from the beginning, you immediately hit the first example, and if you scroll down a few pages, you will see the next. So that's kind of a surprising thing. On the other hand, of course, I don't think it does any harm. Considerations of memory use are not really interesting in this space and age. And yeah, well, okay, it's valid, and it doesn't do real harm. However, one questions, what were those people thinking when they did it?
Rob Ostine, Dragon Research. Just to speak to Rudiger's point, the approach we've taken for years now in our implementation is it is possible to issue a ROA with multiple prefixes, but we don't make it easy. Yeah. So our GUI, for example, only supports one prefix per ROA. Yeah. In our command line interface, if you explicitly tell the command line interface via this obscure field in the CSV file that you want to group multiple prefixes into a single ROA, it will do it, but the default is one per. Yeah, and if people have a real interest in knowing which autonomous system numbers have the, or rather which, how to phrase this correctly, since the autonomous system numbers aren't signed, the ROAs which name certain autonomous system numbers, which ones are the huge numbers of prefixes, we can pull that from the table easily enough. It's not difficult. The worst ones I'm seeing today are in the high 370s of prefixes per ROA, which is kind of nuts.
Carlos Legnick, speaking to Rudiger's point, it's not easy to make general assertions about how each GUI behaves because we don't see them. I only have access to mine. Mine actually will let you do anything. It will suggest you pack, but sorry, it will suggest, yeah, currently the default is pack. You can unpack if you want. Yeah. We are all about choice.
Your free choice. Your free choice.
Yeah, Tim, I'd rather see, just very quick to Rudiger's point. Currently, we do bundle, but we're quite happy to change that. And we'll actually make our code easier. So you just haven't done it yet. So we can easily change it to issue one ROA for each assertion. So.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, on to your next.
Thank you.
Okay. So that we've already covered that one. So there.
Okay. The next draft is the RPKI deployment considerations as the problems analyzed and alternative solutions. Also, I have a presentation in the IETF 95 meetings in this working group. Last slide, please. So the background is that our original intention is to write an informational draft for guidance to introduce the ISP and NIR to deploy the RPKI share the experience of our deployment and include some considerations for the issues which they may encounter during the RPKI deployment process. So I had a presentation, and the last meeting it has some feedback from this working group during the meetings. And thanks Stephen Kent and Randy Bush and Tim help us to polish the draft. Next slide, please. And we also have some comments from Taiji from Japanese that we separate the considerations of the RPKI deployment into these 4 categories. Is separate into RP issues, CA issues, and data synchronization and other issues. The first is the RP issues as described. Next slide, please. The RP issues we can separate into 2 problems. The first one is the TA issues in RP, more than 1 TA. So there is no technical mechanism to prevent 2 or more TAs from asserting control over the same set of the international resources accidentally or maliciously. So this kind of problem obviously may cause resource conflicts on the internet. The second one is how to manage the data management. So how to manage these signed objects after downloading them from the repositories. The second, next please, is the second problem is the CA issues. We also separate 2 problems. The first one is the operational issues of CA behavior. The operational errors by CAs are inevitable and may cause significant impact on the internet in routing. For example, an error in using an ROA, maybe adding a new erroneous route or waking an existing route may cause all rules covered by the original route to become invalid or assume an unknown security status. Next slide, please. The second problem is the unilateral resource revocation. In the RPK architecture, this is a risk that CAs have the power to revoke the international number resources which have been allocated to their descendants just by revoking the corresponding CA certificates. And the result of this can be significant, especially for all RPs will view the origin assertions by the CA and by the descendants to be invalid. So this may cause ISPs to preference rules to the affected prefix. Next slide, please. And the third issue is for the data synchronization. During the RPK deployment, there are we'll consider 3 protocols. The first one is between the CA and the repository. We already have a publication protocol for the resource publication key for the key infrastructure in our group as the IETF is the Sidr work group draft. And the second is between the RP and the repository. We have the rsync protocol and RRDP protocol. The third one is between the RP and the BGP routers. It also is we have the RFC 6, 8, and 10. So next slide, please. Some other issues may be is the mural wall attack is proposed by Cheryl in a paper. In mural wall attacks, a malicious CA presents one view of the RPKI repository that it manages to some RPs and a different view to others because this is because the repository data may be cached by ISPs. It may not be possible for malicious CA to provide in the initial result to a narrowly tailored set of the RPs. And at present, as we all know that the deployment of the RPKI is the incremental stage and incomplete. So some problems we will encountered for the incomplete deployment, and then the other issues may be considered as the no validation carriage. So this too is not very big problem. So I have not described in more details. So next slide, please. So we have updation for this draft after I have the presentation on the last meeting. And we hope some other comments and more suggestions to give us to help to polish this draft. And so any comments?
Doug Montgomery, it's the same comment that Tim made earlier. You want to be careful about the use of the word invalid as potentially distinct from not valid. But invalid means something very specific, an origin validation. So your scenario is about revoking a certificate, making something invalid.
Yeah.
That in general can't happen unless the CA publishes an explicit ROA with a conflicting AS. Just revoking the certificate without that additional action will just result in it being unknown.
I make more consideration for the certificates revocation.
I'm just suggesting being very careful about the words invalid or in particular, look at the difference between invalid and unknown and make sure you're careful about those words.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Tim Bruins, Right and CC. I wanted to comment on your question about call for adoption. Essentially, I think it's good for you if you see concerns and if you have issues to bring them up. I think that's perfectly valid, and I also see a merit in discussing that. However, I think that on many of these issues that you raise, there has been extensive discussion, and at least in my mind, a lot of these things have also already have solutions. So in its present form, I don't think it's ready for working group adoption. But I hope I made myself, I tried to say this the last time, and maybe I wasn't clear. To me, that doesn't mean that we cannot talk about it, right? I hope you see the difference. So here or in private, we can talk about these things. That's fine. But when we would go for a working group adoption, then that implies that we have an agreement about that this is a problem that we all see and kind of largely, agree on as a setting. And I don't think we're there yet.
The first thing that is this work makes sense or meaningful? Do you think this work makes sense?
Well, let me give you an example. If you talk about the scaling of the repository, then we're trying to address that in the RDP document already.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure why it needs to be addressed again in a document like this. That being said, we can talk about it. We can talk about it in private or on a list, I don't mind.
Mhm.
But you don't have to have another working group document in my mind to address that.
But it's a information draft for guidance. It's not a, it's a guidance for the deployment. I'm not sure if you agree that the guidance for the RPKI deployment draft is meaningful.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I can make myself better understood then. But there are a lot of different issues that you touch on, and again, I think it's fine that you raise them. But I would prefer to discuss them first as a non-working group document.
Thank you.
Rüdiger Volk, Deutsche Telekom.
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry.
Guten Tag. Randy Bush, Dragon Research. I think both you, Tim, both you and you were using a word that I think we would frame this, which is guidance. And what's happening here is you and the CNNIC folk have hit and seen issues in working with this and deploying that are causing them to say, hey, as we do it today, watch out for these things and do these things this way. I don't know if it's strong enough for best current practice, even though literally those words would apply. But an informational document that says, that's framed in, hey, here's best hacking practice today, I can live with that. Because some of these things do hit our toes, you know? I'm sorry, Rudiger, but.
Yeah. Rüdiger Volk, Deutsche Telekom. Yeah, well, okay, pretty much agreeing. I would think that, well, okay, probably kind of the document is not yet in a stage where we have figured out how to group the problems and have one or more documents follow that problem grouping. So that is probably agreeing with some of Tim's concerns. I certainly think that a lot of operational concerns and guidance is needed in the area, and this is good contributions to it. But I don't feel we are yet in a ready state where we would say yes, this as a grouping of problems and guidance on them is already in good shape.
Doug Montgomery, so don't we have the origin validation operations document? I probably butchered the title.
There is such a document. It's an RFC.
So I'm sort of torn between, like, several of the things that are presented here basically say, we've designed this as a distributed system, and whenever you have a distributed system, the linkages between the components could fail. So that's kind of a very general observation. So what I was going to suggest is that taking this list of concerns and looking back at, like, origin validation operations and seeing if enough is said about it. Seems like the operative thing to do. And if enough isn't said about it, then either rev that or maybe produce a BCP, but sort of take it to the proactive side of looking at the documents that describe how to deploy these things in reasonable ways and see if your issues are addressed or enhance the recommendations there. Because much like I think Tim said, many of these issues, in a way, are sort of well-known or have been discussed for a long time.
Tim Moses from NCC again. Yeah, so to come back on what, I believe Rudiger and Randy also said, I have no issue with a guidance document where applicable, where things are currently not clear. I just don't think this is in that state just yet. So, and some of these things have already been discussed, as just pointed out. So all I'm saying is I think we should have that discussion first and then see what remains that could go into a general document that is useful to everybody.
I think,
So this is a good initiative from your side to indicate what you're seeing. I just don't think that in its present form it's at that stage yet where you can say this is ready for a general document. But we can have that discussion and see what remains and can go there.
okay, thank you. Thank you for the suggestion.
Randy Bush, Dragon Research. Doug, I can't think of anything we haven't discussed repeatedly and endlessly. There are two religions about document acceptance by working groups. One is, seems to be heavily practiced, for instance, in IDR, our sibling, which is the document must be perfect before it's adopted, and then they just wait for 2 implementations before running it to RFC. The other is what I was brought up with as a child, is yes, this is something we want to work on, and a document gives us a place to discuss it and argue about it endlessly. And so in the latter view, I am not offended by this, and put it up as an informational document, and we can spend the next 3 years arguing about it. Right? It gives us a placeholder and a place to say, hey, here are the current problems. Oh, wow, we fixed these. Here's the next.
Yep.
I won't bore you to death.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to make the comment from here rather than standing up to the mic. Sandy Murphy Parsons. Some of the issues that you bring up in here sound like they're related to the adverse actions draft, in particular the slide that I have up there, which is about CAs revoking certificates. I'm wondering whether you actually in deployment ran into cases where CAs did revoke things improperly, or whether you noticed that it was possible in your analysis, noticed that this was possible. Personally, myself, I think it's been built in deliberately from the very beginning that CAs could revoke certificates. So I don't know that I could, I don't know what to do with that sort of issue being raised. CAs be very careful, because if you make a mistake, it can have impact. Is that the intent of talking about it? Or I'm just not sure what to do with that.
I think it's not very intent, maybe by mistake or misconfiguration. This maybe happen.
Have you had experience in your deployment that it has happened, or?
Just we have some RPK test in our test bed, and we have reference for the CA adverse actions as the workgroup draft reference, and so we do some test in our test bed.
Okay. Okay. All right. Rudiger.
Rudiger Volk, Deutsche Telekom. Sandy, the question whether this analyzes problems in the abstract, or whether it discusses problems that already have been observed. looks a little bit strange in the security area. We are, in my view, security systems should actually prepare before we have seen a successful attack.
Yeah.
The development of the CA ecosystem is not really that advanced at the moment that that a lot of interesting things can have happened. But for a security system, I think it is very appropriate to ask in advance what potential problems are there. And yes, that kind of question seems to be addressed here, and to have overlap with the adverse actions, and kind of resolving, for example, that overlap, and figuring out, well, okay, in which way can the problem be divided in ways so that the result is useful for say a relying party to figure out what attacks its implementation are dealing with already, and what attacks are still out, danger potential, and not yet addressed. Well, okay, I think that's repeating my previous remark that, well, okay, this is not yet framed in a way so that it can be successful. Listening to Randy, I would say yes. Well, okay, kind of. I would say yes. You are addressing problems that we should be discussing and generate documents about. Yes, this is not in a state where we would say yes, this is perfect, and we just wait for 5 years until implementations become ready. So I would like to admit this and to see active discussion of it.
Yeah. Okay.
And probably, for example, look at refactoring this with the adverse actions.
Okay.
Rob Ostine, Dragon Research, variations on the theme Rudiger was just on. I think the work you're doing here is useful in terms of collecting these issues. There is enough overlap with existing documents and such that I don't feel this is ready to go as it is. I think the correct action, my personal opinion, is we should adopt this with the understanding that it might or might not end up eventually being published. Right? It would be a working group document to discuss in the working group. Maybe something derived from it becomes published as an RFC, maybe not. We'll sort that out later. The point at the moment is I think the working group should be working on these issues, and a document is a useful way to do that. I just don't want to confuse matters by having you think that necessarily means, oh yes, we should end up publishing it as an RFC as well. I don't know where we're going to decide that. Sometimes working group documents serve their purpose in the working group and never get published. And sometimes that's fine. It just depends on what we're trying to do. So I think that's about the stage this is at the moment. We'll see where it goes from there.
This is Julian from CNIC. Just to clarify, I think this document is something more precisely. I think it's just a problem statement of the RPK deployment from different entities, different problems. And just like Tim said, we have to analyze more situations and more problems in the future. But I think this document is just a problem statement. Maybe in the future we will do another work of guidance for the deployment. Yeah. Julian from CNIC.
Okay. So, anything else? No? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see who's next. The next item on the agenda was supposed to be Rudiger, but he tells me that he is yielding the floor to the next, which is Dekwan Ma. Correct, Rudiger? Yeah, okay.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I'll be briefing this draft and responding to the question from discussion from mailing list. And by the way, the author has submitted the draft right after the IETF Buenos Aires meeting when we introduced this work for the first time. So next slide, please. Moving along to the background, the fact is requirements imposed on the party are scattered throughout 12 IFC documents. And we believe if we do this document, it will going to help make it to implementer to confident that he or she has addressed all of these generalized requirements. So in short, I think implementers need to know what are those requirements on RP. Next slide. Well, and another observation is that software engineering calls for how to segment the RP system into components with orthogonal functionalities. In doing such, components could be distributed across the operational timeline of users. So accordingly, we believe the taxonomy of generalized RP requirements is going to help have RP role well framed. That's to say, implementers need to know how to organize of these requirements on RP. Next slide, please. Overview. To sum up, we would like to do some collecting, and this document is intended to cite requirements that appears in several RPK RFC documents, making them segmented with orthogonal functionalities in different sections. In some cases, we paraphrase them, and in other cases, we just restate them. Next slide, please. Okay, what will this document be like? We might see this document from 3 different perspectives. One, are we going to redefine the RP? No. So, are we going to collect data in one place? Yes. And this document is going to outline RP functions, summarize them, and then give references to those precise sections or paragraphs. Okay. And the last one, are we going to provide implementation guidance? Well, the author believe that we might do this work in the upcoming version to write a extra section to provide a good place based on experience from RP implementers. So I'm particularly looking forward to the contributions from the RP software design task force, such as RIPE NCC validator and RPK.net and such, and RPK.net in addition to BBN RP-Stars. Next slide. Outline. It's easy for the readers to figure out the outline when he or she to take glance at the catalog of the draft. So as far as the RP was designed, the function of RP or requirements of RP could be divided into 4 categories. That is fetching and caching RPK repository objects, certificate and CIO processing, and processing the signed objects and delivering the validated cache data to the BGP speakers. Okay, so okay, next slide. Thank you.
I went back, is that correct?
Right, thank you. Okay. Right, next slide.
Next?
Yes. Yeah. And next, okay. Clarifications. Well, feedbacks have been received since this document was introduced to the mailing list. So I'm therefore feeling obliged to deliver a clear message here that we're not suggesting that implementers could should skip reading those IFC documents in full. So anyone who wants to comprehend the RPK are required to know all of the documents, let alone the implementer. So, but granted, I do see the possibility that this document could be a manifest of all the necessary RP functions. And the authors can't help but see the parallel, the similarity that the BGP overview draft is informational and provide a high-level description, a concise description of what a router need to do to implement the BGP-SEC. And the BGP overview document provides provide a place to learn where the relevant IFC document that provide the BGP-SEC specification info. Okay. Yes, and I really think this document could be well. I think this document could help the implementer to know how to implement the basic and necessary RP functionalities. So next slide, please. Okay. Recall that like nearly a month ago, my co-author Steve Kent wrote to the mailing list that in response to the argument that the RP requirements document is kind of redundant relative to the existing working group document on RPK tree validation. So I would like to take this opportunity to reiterate his point of view. That is, RPK tree validation describes how the RIPE-N CC RP software works, while our document is generic. The tree validation document is expressly a description of one particular RP implementation. That is an example of how that implementation tries to meet the RP requirements. Okay. So we believe it's appropriate to proceed with both of the documents. So we hope this document could be adopted as a working group items. Next slide, please. Well, this owl photo was taken by Steve Kent from his Florida field trip this year. Well, what a lovely bird. I love it. So any questions?
Rob Ostein, Dragon Research. I'm going to abstain from expressing an opinion on whether or not your document should go forward, because I am arguably the worst possible person to ask whether or not the current documents are clear. Since I've been doing this for so long that in some cases I think the documents were written from my code rather than the other way around. In one specific point, though, I wanted to follow up on. It turns out that my current RP implementation, as opposed to my old one, is actually very close to what RIPE does as well, simply because the techniques are sort of dictated by the requirements of RRDP. And once you go down the road into RRDP, you're kind of stuck with all the hash-based stuff that Tim and Oleg describe in their document. So while I wouldn't say that I'm 100% following exactly what RIPE does, it's closer than you might think.
Okay, thank you.
This is Russ Housley. In the PKIX working group, we had documents that describe what certificates were and how they related to each other. And then there was some informational documents that described ways that one could implement. And what we don't know is whether implementers actually found those useful or not. But the path construction and then the path validation were basically the subjects of those documents. I think it'd be worth finding out whether those actually got used by implementers or they were just, you know, somebody spending a lot of time with little yield. I would hate to do it if there's not if from that experiment we could find out whether it was useful.
Oleg.
Oleg Moravsky, RAP NCC. So I commented on the list and I could just, that was a long email. Maybe I could just reiterate and make myself clear. I'm not opposed of you of writing and I appreciate the effort. I'm still not sure this will not create yet another document to the 11. I think you mentioned already that everybody needs to know and maintain. So the big question for me is still that what you seem to try to achieve is to refer correctly to all of these other RFCs and what needs to be done. So it's a huge amount of work. So I think I need your commitment and the working group commitment if we want to accept this as a working group document, that we are going to keep it up to date and consistent and yeah, because even at the current state, it requires still a lot of things to be implemented in the document.
So Oleg, do you mean if we do this work, we have to spend more time to keep this document up to date? You mean that is a bunch of hard work? So by saying that, you mean this work is not reasonable, right?
Well, again, maybe another thing what I want to say, what I think there are two possible ways further for this document. Either we say this is basically yet another document which describes everything precisely what RP should do, and then it's really a huge amount of work and it has to be consistent all the time, or it's more informational, and I think then we have to remove a lot of things from there because they are too specific for that type of the document. And what I see now, sometimes it's too open and just informational, and sometimes it's very specific, but not always. So if it would be always very specific on every point, then I agree, but it's still a lot of work to be done there. Or we need to remove many specific points from there, so it just becomes an overview of relying party, you do this and that, and please go to these other documents for all full details. Something like that.
Okay. So
now I see just a mix of both. So that's why, yeah, I don't have clear picture what the end of it should be.
Rüdiger Volk, Deutsche Telekom. Potentially the previous slide could be helpful. I'm not quite sure. Well, okay. The way I tend to look at this is the RIPE NCC document is headed and should be a precise product description, which the users or customers need for operation, and which potential users might use for checking whether their procurement really should take that product offering. What you are doing, I think, should be or could be something that helps a person who is in this position and judging different RP implementations and check, well, okay, what problems are there? Which of the choices actually do this function, and potentially which of the potential ways? And yes, kind of keeping that up to date and tracking the evolving knowledge and evolution of the systems is going to be serious work. And kind of never finished. On the other hand, I think it actually would provide a lot of value and thinking about it a little bit in comparison to what Russ was telling, in the RPKI, my expectation is that a lot of consumers of RP implementations actually will care a lot about judging the exact characteristics of the product they are going to use and exactly figuring out how to operate them. Probably a lot different from standard PKI-X users. And kind of this scrutiny that I would expect many RP operators will have, I think is really a crucial part for making RPKI reliable and successful. So I think I very much agree with your bottom line, and I'm seeing places, and yes, kind of all of the pieces, and in particular yours, is hard. And again, there probably is some overlap with topics covered in adverse actions and potentially in newspaper.
Yep. Sandy Murphy.
20 cents worth of.
Sandy Murphy Parsons. I was struck by Oleg's comment about how on earth are we going to keep this thing current. Every time somebody publishes a new RFC for years to come, this document has to be updated. And I don't know how to ensure that, you know, how to keep it from going stale. I had this crazy thought that what we needed was an IANA registry. You know, you just publish your section number in the IANA registry. With respect to the correspondence between this requirements list and the RIPE document, if this outline that you have had there was a corresponding discussion of every item in the outline, you could regard this as a template for people to follow, sort of like Rudiger suggested, only the RIPE document is only talking about a very small piece of this. So it's not that there's not the relationship there that you would expect. So you have like kind of like three purposes. One is a one-stop shopping to list all the requirements, and one is guidance to the implementers. And I forget what the third one was. So thanks. End of my comments. John?
John Scudder. Sandy, your comment about, and other people's, about keeping the document up to date for years to come. I mean, suggests to me, I mean, that either describes, you know, an internet draft that never, ever, ever goes to RFC, and we certainly have existence proofs that that can happen, or it describes a wiki. So, you know, decide if you, I mean, if you want to proceed forward with the work, decide if you want it to be an internet draft that never goes to RFC, or decide if you want to keep it as a wiki instead.
Okay.
So I have a question. Tim, in the management discussion, yeah, Tim, in the management discussion, I remember that you mentioned one proposal is that we need a generalized document or like this. So would you please bring back the discussion? So I don't remember that correctly.
So what I said on the list is that I believe we mentioned it here during sessions from time to time when we started work on a specific document that we have, that we were thinking that maybe we can have a more general document following it later. We hadn't made any decision, or commitment yet. So, and that's why I was somewhat surprised to see this work already come up. That being said, time is limited for all of us, so I don't really mind that much. I do have the same concerns about, if you're going to do this work, how are you going to keep it current?
Okay.
That I see there's a place for having both things, but yeah, that is a concern, and actually that's also a concern for our own document, if I may say so, because our current implementation can also change in the future. So whilst I'm happy to work on it now as a document, I appreciate John's comment. It's also something that we maybe need to think about. I think it's useful for initial discussion maybe, but maybe we should consider that eventually this should not be an RFC, but should be something that, yeah, something else. I'm not sure yet. I don't know if there's any precedence, but also in our case, if we do a new version of our validator, we may want to change things. And if we then need to issue a new RFC or an update, that's also a lot of work, right? Whilst we really appreciate the feedback from the working group on the implementation. See what I mean? So in that context, I think it's also nice to discuss this. But before we, put an RFC stamp on it and say, okay, this is done, I think we need to have thought that through, how we're going to do this towards the future.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything more?
According to the comments and the feedbacks, I think maybe the biggest concern is that we have to keep this document current. So I would like to exchange notes with my co-author Steve to see how to respond to these questions. Maybe we could, maybe we will be discussing this topic in the mailing list. Thank you.
Okay.
That's all. Thank
Okay.
you.
Next up is Carlos.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Carlos. I'm from LACNIC, and I'm going to be very short on this. This is just an update on a document that has a name that I now regret somehow because it's really long and confusing, but basically describes the use or a different form of using trust anchors for the ARRs. Next slide, please. This is the same
Excuse
slide.
me. I'm not getting the sound from the microphone. Are people able to hear it? Is that working? Okay.
Okay, thanks. This is the same slide we showed, we displayed in Buenos Aires when this document was first introduced. Basically describes another subject that, as has been mentioned during the morning, has been discussed to death in this working group. The perceived fragility of the validation algorithms in the face of inter-IRR transfers. Next slide, please. So this proposal workaround involves using all resources in the 5 trust anchors. Next slide, please. So we submitted a 0.1 version this week. Basically, that's a lot of wording cleanup, corrects the use of some terms. And the 2 significant changes are acknowledging the progress that the validation reconsidered draft has seen in this working group, because the previous text was kind of pessimistic. Now this is an optimistic paragraph on the same subject. And basically indicates that the authoritative source for verifying resource allocation in different regions is the NRO delegated stats file that is published at the NRO website, right? The appropriate URL is included in the document. We, the authors, believe that these 2 changes address the comments we received in Buenos Aires and in the list. And next slide, please. we would like to actually request for working group adoption so we can get help for the working group in getting the text clear enough that is widely understood, and any other feedback will be welcome, of course. Thank you.
Okay. Any comments?
Shoot.
I did notice that multiple trust anchors that have overlap in what they're claiming came up in a previous presentation. So
Yeah, we know there are overlaps, and there are some overlaps that are bound to occur.
yeah,
Transient overlaps, I mean. But we feel that topic that is it's independent from this use. I mean, it's something we will be happy to discuss, but it's not, I mean, necessarily tied to this document.
okay. No comments? Okay.
Thank you.
So you want to ask for working group adoption,
Yes, please.
and we'll be doing that soon then.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Yep, yep, yep.
All right. People do that, they can pick the mic up, right? Okay. So Sidr has been around for in the routing area for a long time. I think we're at the point where we have almost all of the protocol work done. There's a few documents in flight, and this draft is going to, or this presentation will talk about sort of the situation ongoing after that. Yeah, let's just hit the page now. Okay. Yep, I just said all that. These documents that are at the bottom are the ones that are currently in flight. Or I'm sorry. Yeah, I think these are currently in flight, and they're not sent off to IESG yet. So we have to decide to finish these up in the next 3 to 6 months, something like that. We can. Yes, I understand. That sounds funny. We can debate this later, but the point is these need to get finished up here. These can't go to ops. Okay, in the ops area, ideally, once Sidr gets some more deployment, there's already some RPKI deployment. When other things start happening, there'll be some things that get broken, things that need to get fixed, ways that people implement things on their network or with their gear that other folks could benefit from. That's sort of what ops is supposed to do. So all that work should not be in the routing area, it should be in ops. So these drafts are currently in flight here, but they probably are ops documents and should get moved. Most of the stuff we talked about today, actually, where people are asking for adoption for the document, almost all of that looks to me like it should actually go to ops. But we can debate that again later, like on list. Please, next slide. I put together some, or Sandy and I put together some basic charter stuff. Alvaro has looked it over. I think Joel has seen some of it as well. So the two responsible ADs from different places have kind of looked. There's no real names in the charter. I'll put the charter on the email list so you don't have to type that all out. But ideally, we should try and get a charter approved, sent to the IESG, have them create the working group in ops, and then figure out who's going to do all the work over there and move the documents as appropriate. Yes, that's also funny. I think that's the last slide. So if there's any questions about what's going on or the timing, that would be great. I think Alvaro's aiming at sort of finish up the work we have here in the next 3 to 6 months, like by the next meeting or the meeting after that, then have ops going by the next meeting so that the work that's in flight now can continue over there as required. Okay, question?
Randy Bush, Dragon Research. Randy Bush, Dragon Research. Will both groups coexist?
I think this is probably an AD question, but
Or it's just intended to overlap and.
I think it's
Then move
overlap,
along.
and then we talked about this at the last meeting in Buenos Aires. I think the intent is to have the mailing list exist still in the routing area, so if there are issues with the protocol, that we can bring those there, and if there's a specific problem, we can recharter the working group quickly with a particular work item, which is fix Randy's problem, and then get rid of the working group
Good
again.
luck on that.
Well, maybe not your problem, but
Will there be a relaxation of the dual implementation requirement that is prevalent in routing but not in ops?
I'm not sure. Hopefully ops isn't building new protocol thingies that require two implementations.
Joel Yegley. My sincere hope is that we won't be looking at major protocol enhancements. And so I would hope that a charter would tend to steer clear of things that would require that.
Text accepted for charter.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably a subject of debate, right?
What has
I don't think it's operationally useful if everyone does everything differently. So I mean, I think we want to think about that, but I also would expect that the routing area working group charter and the way that things are done in routing would remain in force if we have documents that we need to advance as routing area documents. I mean, I'm not speaking for the routing ADs here, but I would hope that that would be the case.
Yeah, Alvaro Rosana, routing AD, yes. That's the intent, right? The intent is operational issues in the Sidr ops or whatever we end up calling this thing. And if there are protocol enhancements, we'll deal with them in the routing area. As Chris said, if there's specific focus that we need to reassemble the working group, we'll figure a way to deal with that. If it's something that maybe we can deal with in RTWG or IDR or somewhere, then we'll deal with it there. I guess the real answer is when the time comes and we know what the work is, then we'll make the decision then. The other thing that you mentioned, 3 to 6 months, I would really, really, really like to see the ops part meeting for the first time in Korea and for the routing part to finish before Korea. The intent here is not to leave any document unpublished or whatever the working group wants to do, but that would be kind of nice versus coexisting for a long time after that. Of course, that's what I would really like to do, but it depends on you guys making the work progress.
Randy, again, to be specific, we do not have interoperable full implementations of CAs.
Okay.
That's
Right, I'm not talking about future work.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like something you would want to call out in the charter, like if we're going to work on that. So, I mean, that might be a specific work item, and we should tease that apart.
Question for Randy. What interoperability can be tested for CAs? Delegation, I guess. I think we have done that at least in one direction. Right?
All CAs do not implement all objects.
John Scudder. Just an observation, in the previous talk, a whole bunch of people said, oh my gosh, it's going to be really hard to deal with this document because you'll be constantly revising it because we're constantly revising the entire rest of the document set. And now I just heard that we're going to be done with the document set in 3 to 6 months. I'm having some kind of cognitive whiplash.
I think the whiplash is that we should really come to conclusion as quickly as possible, right? That's the whole point. Some focus on finish.
I won't speak for Alvaro, but like I see this stuff coming through the IETF last call and IESG queue. So at some point we will call it done because it's sitting in the RFC editor's bucket. If we get there with the charter items, then this working group doesn't have much choice except to either recharter or close down. So the sooner those things get there, the better I think we are.
Right?
Yeah.
6 items. These 6 items are getting ready to get sent out or dealt with. Like Slurm and LTA use cases, we just haven't seen somebody say, please, dear God, stick a wooden stake in its heart. Right? I mean, we haven't done anything with those documents in 2 years. Okay, we'll do that today. So 4 documents that are protocol related that are getting ready to get sent out, right? As soon as we decide that we're done. Focus on finish.
John again. So that I think is also a comment against the previous talk on the, practicability of doing a, unifying overview document. Like, oh, by the way, if we're almost done with the document set, then maybe this isn't such a crazy idea.
Still time to get in a few more revisions. But yeah, I mean, I think I would hope the rationale for spinning up ops work around this is that we have something that's deployable. Like if we presume that we don't, then we have a problem. We should probably put the brakes on this. But like I hope to get there. In part because I'd like to be able to use it myself. So there's some enlightened self-interest here. But there you go.
All right, we have 15 minutes, well, 14 and change, 13 and change. Anybody else? Or we can leave early. By the way, these 4 documents should get moved to ops area when the group spins up, if we decide to do that. Well, sorry, if we finish up the charter document. Carlos, good. 14 minutes.
Hi, Carlos. I find Joel's observation about whether it's deployable not very interesting, and it could provide like a parameter or a metric to actually measure whether to move forward with this or not. And actually going into that question, I believe that the RPKI side of this, I mean, the certification part of this, I mean, we have like, in our region, we have like a 20% coverage, something like that. It's better than IPv6 already. So I know that's not saying much, but if we could. Yeah, exactly. So it looks pretty deployable.
Okay. Anybody else?
Rob Ostine, Dragon Research. I just had a question for the working group as a whole, actually. How concerned are we about the fact, that the point that Randy raised about not having complete interoperable implementations of CA? I think my understanding, I could be wrong, my understanding is that, to the best of my knowledge, I implement all the stupid little things. I think most of the others implement almost everything, just not quite. Like, I don't know if any of the other implementations handle Ghostbuster records yet. At one point, APNIC's old implementation handled up-down protocol in both directions, and then they turned it off out of solidarity with the other RIRs or something like that. I don't know if any of the Java-based ones handle up-down in both directions. Can they act as a child as well as a parent? I just don't know how much coverage we have on those sorts of things and how critical it is. So it's actually a question to the working group. How much do we care? Because we can try to figure out what the discrepancies are and how much work it would be to fix. My understanding is the reason that we've stayed in this state has just been everybody has their own work priorities. For example, for the RIRs, being a child has not been a high priority. Yes, Chris?
My first guess, Rob, is that somebody needs an implementation report so we can say, hey, look, 7 out of 10 doctors agree. Right? Because your entire conversation was, I think, and maybe, and at one time, and perhaps. Focus.
RRDP implementations?
Tim is right, NCC. Yeah, RDP, the implementations are there. I think
There's
more specifically, well, we don't have running codes where we are a child, but we have in our test setup implemented such code. So I don't see an issue there that is, blocking from a protocol point of view. I don't know if that's good enough. But, what we're not implementing at the moment is specifically Ghostbuster records and router certificates. I can see that maybe being an issue in validation for our hosted platform. Yeah, we're also looking at what our members tell us that they want, right? So it's definitely something we could work on if people tell us to do so, but we also need to plan our, we have time and allocation constraints like everybody else. So I'm not sure if that's blocking from a protocol point of view. In my understanding, yeah, well, it seems to work, but indeed there's only one implementation at the moment for that.
Randy Bush with Dragon Research, let's not go into the details, right?
Right here.
Right.
Not right here.
Here, right now. Let's go do operational testing and interop testing and enumerate it and do an implementations document like good little boys and girls.
Rudiger? No? Okay. Going once? Going twice? See you all maybe in Seoul.
Excuse me?
What? Oh, then why was I going? Get up here.
Sorry. My fault.
You have 9 minutes. You did it in 5 in IEPG. Here, let me do this for you. There.
Okay, hey, so you all know what I'm going to say. It is in your hearts. If that was true, why do I keep hitting contradictions? People say invalid ROA. You should never see one. There is the only thing that you will see is what the relying party software will let you see, which is valid ROAs. A ROA is invalid only if it doesn't crypto validate up to a trust anchor. You should never see such a thing. There are no invalid ROAs in the real world, right? The validity of a ROA has nothing to do with the BGP announcement. Okay? It is only the crypto path to the trust anchor. A ROA may or may not cause a BGP announcement to be valid or invalid. But the ROA is not valid or invalid. You have a ROA, it's compared to a BGP announcement, and that ROA says that announcement is invalid compared to me. But furthermore, the AS number in the ROA has no responsibility. When you find yourself with a ROA that marks your BGP announcement as invalid because it has some AS that you've never heard of before in your life, do not call up the people who own that AS. They have nothing to do with it, right? Whoever generated the ROA was the prefix owner. the AS may or may not choose to announce that prefix. That's the AS's assertion in relation to that prefix. They didn't sign the ROA, they didn't generate the ROA, they don't know the ROA's out there, though admittedly most operators don't know how their networks run anyway. So if that ROA makes your announcement invalid because of the AS number, you can either fix the ROA if you control it, or just create a new ROA with the correct AS. Which brings us to the next slide, which is it takes only one ROA to make a route valid. Next slide. There can be 1 million ROAs which mark an announcement as invalid. The ROA for 1230/24, there can be 3,000 of them with 3,000 different AS numbers, none of them which match the BGP announcement. But if there's a 3001st that does, then that announcement is valid.
Yes, Rüdiger Volk. Well, okay, I think if we had been a little bit more careful in our wording, we could have avoided using the word valid for cryptographically valid or validation, reconsidered, and the term for the classification of announcements. Maybe in continuing and further work, we should actually look at trying to make the language unambiguous.
Rob Austin, Dragon Research, we tried that. People confused it anyway. At least at one point, we were calling the certificate stuff, verification, and the route stuff validation, and people confused them, and it all became a big swamp again. One, I wouldn't say quibble, but Randy's statement that you never see invalid ROAs in the cryptographic sense is not quite true. There's one exception to that. If you're actually looking at the raw data or reports on the raw data, you will see things saying, well, I threw these away because they were broken. But other than that, I agree. By the time it actually gets through the verification process, you only get the good ones. Yeah.
Jacob Height, Cisco. I was wondering why you put this up, because I didn't think it was something that was such a surprise to anyone. But anyway, I thought of another one that you could add to this. If you put a ROA in, then you must advertise that prefix.
No.
Yes, you should. Now, I'm not done yet. If you intend not to advertise the prefix, then you should put the ROA for AS0.
No.
The person who creates the ROA is the...
Now, I'll tell you why.
Let me tell you why not.
All right.
Right now, I am Rüdiger's customer. I do not speak BGP. Rüdiger does. So I have issued a ROA for Rüdiger's AS. Rüdiger's service sucks. You can tell it right here in the network. Notice how many packets are dropping. I'm going to switch to Jared's network. Make before break. I am going to issue a ROA right now for that same prefix for Jared's network. And it's going to stay there for 2 months while I get the circuit switched, the routers going, etc. Duplicate ROAs for multiple ASs, common, make before break.
I wasn't arguing against that.
You were saying you should not issue a ROA that doesn't exist, you said. In fact, issue a ROA 0.
That's not what I said. If you do not intend to advertise the prefix, or anyone intend for anyone to advertise the prefix, if you intend the prefix to be private, that you don't advertise it, or intend no one to advertise it, then you should issue the ROA
If I own the
For
address
A0.
space, but I really don't intend to put it in BGP.
Right.
That's the case you're addressing.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why AS0 is there, correct.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Go for that.
That's what I
The,
was saying.
the problem with AS0 is that anybody can issue, well, anybody who controls the prefix or its parent can issue a ROA for AS42.
But then AS42 can advertise it, and you didn't want that.
But yes, point taken, thank you.
Okay, Sandy Murphy Parsons. I resonate with Rudiger's remark. I have, we have valid certificates. We talk about routes being valid. We talk about BGP path attributes being valid. We at one point talked about them being not good, but now they're not valid. And now we're going to have valid resources in our valid certificates. People are going to be confused. There's no hope.
Don't forget BGP sec.
I said BGP path attributes, didn't I?
Yeah.
Okay. And about never seeing the ones that are invalid, you're relying, our RPKI Viz stuff will show you ones that are invalid, show you certificates that have validity problems or about to come invalid because they're about to expire. And it dances very carefully to make sure that it can show you the ones that aren't good.
Can I go home now?
Yes, you can. Okay, so we'll try again. Going once, going twice. Anyone have any further comments? Ah, that's right. Sorry. You're not on my slide list. Here we go.
Sorry, this is going to be without slides, and it will be quick. At the last IETF in Buenos Aires, I'm Marcus from BSI. Hello. At the last IETF in Buenos Aires, LACNIC organized a ROA signing party where they invited some local operators, introduced them to RPKI, and let them sign ROAs on site. And we picked up this idea and organized a similar event yesterday during the lunch break. And there were a bit more than 20 people attending. Some of them already had an idea what RPKI is, like Sandy or Rudiger. But there were also some German ISPs. We intended to do this meeting in German, but we ended up doing it in English anyway. So I think there were 5 operators present, and 3 of them decided to create ROAs yesterday during the lunch break. So I think that was quite a success. Perhaps I would like to see this this become a regular thing during IETFs. Just invite some local operators and introduce them to RPKI just to get some traction. Things you could do better next time. Don't send the invitation 2 weeks in advance. Plan a bit more ahead.
We had some network problems too, if I recall correctly.
Sorry?
I think we had some network problems. People were having trouble reaching. No?
I don't think so. We had some trouble understanding what max prefix length meant, so we need to explain this better. And there was also a problem with the RPKI with the the website from Ripener, not with the website, but people didn't understand that they had to publish after they've created a ROA because the button is all at the bottom of the page. And yeah, but apart from this, I think it worked quite nicely.
Okay. And we have a comment, Marcus?
No.
Marcus?
No.
No?
No, AOB.
Okay.
Just so people know, there is an actual running live instance in the real running live global RPKI of a parent, a child, and a grandchild up-down protocol.
Yeah. Worked examples. Wonderful. Yes.
Comment. Taiji from JPNIC, a comment for you. We also have this similar event, and I think this is very important for the deployment. But for our event, IP address holder is not the operator of the network. So we made a sticker for the giving information inside the organization, so they can find the connection between address holder and the operators. Just a comment.
Okay. Okay, for the third time, going once, going twice, we're over time. Okay, thank you.